Well, thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you all for having me tonight. It's so exciting to see so many people online. I see a lot of familiar names and a few new ones, so great to see everybody. And again, thanks for having me. So let me try to pull up my slides really quick, which is never the most smooth process. And here we go. All right, we're off and running. So the first thing I wanted to say is thank you to all of you because we held this peer-reviewed medical research program campaign, the PRMRP campaign, earlier in the year. And incredibly, on our first year of trying, we were successful. So this really is such a huge thing for this community. And it is thanks to everyone who wrote a letter or made a phone call or held a meeting. It really is a huge feather in the cap of the volunteers that made it happen. So just to quickly recap, what that means is this is a program, it's a grant funding program. It happens to fall within the Department of Defense, and it's a relatively small program. There's a pool of $370 million, and in order to get access to that money, you have to be on the list of eligible conditions. And so for the first time in fiscal year 26, FSHD is going to be on that list. So any researchers working on projects that need funding can now apply for that pool. Just to give you a little bit of context for how significant that is, we know that myotonic dystrophy, for example, research has pulled $24 million out of this pool of money over the last 7 years. And that is money that is not coming from donors. So it's a really exciting new opportunity. And again, just massive thanks to all of the advocates who worked on this. The next steps that you will see coming up include, right now we're sort of in the thank you process. So just going back and acknowledging all of our senators for, whether or not they actually advocated for us, we'll never truly know, but, but we say thank you as an important touch point anyway. Coming up in the fall, probably around October. It's a little bit squishy because we have to kind of respond to what's going on within the government and their process. But probably in October, we'll be hosting a webinar and recording it naturally that's really aimed at the researchers. It's a different application process than a traditional NIH grant. So we'll be hosting that here coming up soon. And we'll ask for your help in advertising that because you all are so well connected, particularly research centers. So we'll ask you to put that out there for us as well. And then later in the year, we'll be doing some succession planning. So this is a program that is annual. You do have to ask to be included every year. You have to keep advocating year over year. Just because you get in once doesn't mean you're in it forever. So we'll be doing that sort of succession planning along the road. So the first step that we can all take now, and anybody can do this, whether or not you did have any part in the campaign earlier, is to say thank you to your senators. And as much as it is a thank you, it is also an acknowledgement and sort of a notification of, hey, we got into this. Maybe next year, that will be a nice little reminder that they could also be supportive of us in this way. So there's a link for you here if you don't know who your senator is or how to contact them. And a quick little template for you to use if you want to just send a quick note that briefly summarizes what it is that we are contacting them about. But it is a great way to reach out, again, just to establish contact and let them know that you're supportive of this. And then later on, if we want to reach out for a totally different reason, you can reference back to this or, the fact that you have reached out or that they've heard of FSHD before will make a big difference as we build momentum for future asks. So one question that I wanted to ask all of you is how, when you reach out to elected officials for any cause, not necessarily just this one, how you prefer to do that. And I'm asking this because, as we look to the future and we look to different types of software solutions or strategies as we look ahead, it does help us to know how people prefer to communicate. So just really quick, if you take your phone and scan this QR code, you can respond to a poll. And this is my first time using this, but it worked really, really well in one of our staff meetings, so I thought I'd give it a go. Oh, look at that. Somebody filled it out. Hooray. All right, I'm going to move you all to the other side of my screen here real briefly.
Right, excuse me, do you want all of the above or everything we use, or do you only want our most preferred of all?
I would like your most preferred of all, and that will give me a baseline because I know that there are, some people who will only communicate in one way and some people who will do all of the above, and that's fabulous. I think those people are relative outliers. So if you give me your top choice, that will give me a starting place and that will be helpful. Thank you. I'll let that go a couple more seconds, but this is exciting and more or less what I kind of expected. I will say, just as a compliment to anybody who is on this call, who did participate in one of the meetings that we held for the PRMRP campaign, they were really fabulous meetings and they were just so compelling and raw and honest. And it was an honor to be a part of this meeting. So if any of you were part of those, thank you very much for your efforts. Okay, perfect. Email over form, interesting. Hmm. Okay, well, I will carry on, but we can loop back to this if we want to. I wanted to sort of touch on what's going on, and this was really kind of the hot topic around the 4th of July, so maybe a month and a half ago now. But as you may have noticed, when we talk about anything government related, they love acronyms even more than we do. So you have the PRMRP, and then here I want to talk a little bit about what's going on over in Medicare and Medicaid. So the government department is HHS, or Health and Human Services. Within that, CMS is the program, that's the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, not the best acronym, but here we are. So when you look at Medicare and Medicaid, there are some differences between them, but there is that big pool of people in the middle who are dual eligible. So this can kind of apply in different ways depending on your situation. So Medicare is a program that is administered at the federal level. So it is the federal health insurance that is intended to serve people who are age 65 plus and or with disabilities and certain conditions. Compare that by the state. And it is intended to serve people who have lower incomes, and therefore it comes with some caveats in the form of asset limits, which I could get on a soapbox and stand here all night, but for the sake of time, we will continue. Medicaid also has other sub-programs that you may have heard of, including CHIP, the Child Health Insurance Program, which is an interesting program in and of itself because it can function as a part of Medicaid or not as a part of Medicaid, depending on your situation. It gets very nuanced very quickly. But Medicaid can offer benefits that Medicare does not, such as long-term care, recurring costs, nursing homes, things like that. So there are situations in which even if you might prefer to be on Medicare, it might actually benefit you to be on Medicaid, and it gets a little wild. So around July 4th, this thing happened that we know of as budget reconciliation, also called HR 1, also in some circles called the One Big Beautiful Bill. And that changed a number of things. And so just to kind of quickly go through some of those changes and how that applies, the big thing that everybody was talking about at the time is that it introduced these work requirements. But what I'd like to point out is that only applies to the expansion group. So that would be adults aged 19 to 64 who make between 100 and 138% of the federal poverty level. So it is a relatively small slice of people that those work requirements apply to. Generally speaking, in this community, because if you are on one of these programs and you have FSHD, that qualifies as a disability or a certain condition. And so you would be exempt from that work requirement, even if you fell in that little slice. However, generally speaking, because of the way that states have to prove this, it is going a lot of additional paperwork, and you're going to have to repeatedly prove that you qualify for the exemption. And I don't know yet, and I haven't heard a lot of stories yet, but I anticipate that that will look pretty messy administratively. Another big change that was introduced is, and I'm skipping a couple of bullets down here, particularly regarding the child health insurance program. It introduced waiting periods and lockout periods, which again, just an administrative kind of nightmare paperwork wise, because obviously, missed payments or missed paperwork or delayed paperwork can happen for any number of reasons. And so reintroducing waiting periods and lockout periods can block people from getting health insurance. I mean, we can go through all of these in depth. I don't think we necessarily need to, but some things that happened that maybe weren't on the worse side included a slight increase in physician payments, which ultimately incentivizes them to take Medicare patients, which is great. The Orphan Cures Act was expanded. Orphan Cures Act and Orphan Drug Act are different acts. I got confused about that at first. I'm not ashamed to admit, but that just incentivizes companies who are working in multiple rare disease spaces to move their programs forward. So that could be a good thing in our space, particularly where we have a couple of companies who are looking into like the muscle regeneration areas. That might be beneficial to us. And then there was a rural hospital fund set up, which it's not everything, but it's something, right? So, I think there were a lot of changes that could potentially be really harmful, and we're still all really working out how to deal with this. Particularly when you look at things like the higher provider rates and the lower provider taxes and introducing co-pays and things like that in a program that's really already got so many criteria and so many strict layers when it comes to the income and the asset limits. Really, if you do use Medicaid now, I think there's a lot of things to be looking out for in the future. Another question I wanted to ask this group is, what types of health insurance this group has? And I think we are learning a lot more. We've learned a lot in the last year and a half as an organization about the types of health insurance that the broader FSHD community has access to. And that's been really helpful. But I think, we still have a lot to learn. And particularly as we're looking forward in the next couple of years, the FSHD Society is really thinking hard about how we are going to approach payer system advocacy. We've done a lot in the last couple of years on legislative and policy advocacy. We've done a lot of work in the regulatory space, but we really haven't dove in head first, shall we say, when it comes to the insurance systems. And I think probably a good place to start will be in CMS, but it might be in private insurance. And I think it will kind of depend on what we continue to learn about what this community uses and has access to. So this is really helpful. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And this result here looks actually really similar to some of the commercial research, for example, that Fulcrum had done a few years ago that we inherited when they suspended their program. So this is validating. And I'm seeing the numbers shift around a little bit, but it looks pretty familiar to me. And again, this is really helpful as we're thinking about, how we strategize and how we prioritize our resources for advocacy efforts in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of switching to Medicare. My paperwork's in, so from private employer. So I just put in Medicare because that's where I'll be hopefully in a month.
Darlene, we are keeping our fingers crossed for you. I hope it all goes smoothly.
So far it hasn't.
No, no, I know. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say it goes smoothly, but ultimately You'll get there. Okay. Thank you all so much. I wanted to also give you just a couple of places that I look when I'm looking for a thorough and balanced look at what's going on. The MDI does a great job on their blog, on their news blog. So that's one place I go to. Kaiser Permanente also has a pretty good blog when it comes to policy issues. So that's another place I go check out. And then the Georgetown University, I think it's HPI, the Health Policy Institute, they also do a lot of really great articles that really kind of break down all of the nuances of the language that's coming out. So I put a couple of links in here, and these are a couple of, at least one of them is from June. Again, this is one of those things, the budget reconciliation this year was so massive and obviously involved so much more than just health issues, but even larger groups than ours, like MDA and like EveryLife, are working really hard to digest all of those changes and what they mean. And some of the changes were made, written in at the last minute, sort of non-traditionally, let's say. And we're all kind of working together to figure out what it means for our community and where those impacts are going to land. I have a quick late breaking update. Although things move so fast these days, I don't even know if August 7th is late breaking anymore. But one of the more recent things that we heard about was an executive order related to NIH grants. And what this particular order does, and there are links, you can read it here, is that it inserts a government appointee into the NIH grant review process. The idea behind this executive order was to ensure that NIH grants given out align projects with the priorities of the administration. We anticipate that this will slow down the grant approval process, and we've heard from some of our physicians that that grants are just taking weeks and sometimes months longer to come through than would typically be expected. So that's the immediate result that we're already seeing. We anticipate that once August recess is over and Congress comes back to work, that there will be some court challenges. And we're still, as an organization, working to figure out, what our legislative play is here and how we can oppose these changes. So there are still
things. You want me to do the fish or you?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Another plug if you want to hear this meeting.
Oh.
You want to do the fish or me or you? Okay, we'll leave it at 7.
One of the questions that I wanted to ask, because we're kind of in a period right now of reviewing all of the changes that have come through in the last couple of months, and looking forward to strategically how we're going to approach different policy issues in the future. I'd like to take a quick pause and ask this group sort of an open-ended question. What areas of focus, legislative, regulatory, it's the end of my night. I've lost all of my words. But really, what are the areas of focus that are important to you? And it could be general. It could be that, I think we should focus on grant opportunities, or it could be really specific. If there's one particular, law that's standing out in your mind as something you wish to support or oppose. Great. Yeah, absolutely. Prepping the insurance companies to pay for this. There really is a lot of work going on globally on access to treatments. So obviously we know that treatments are coming, never fast enough, obviously. But once they get here, they're no good to us sitting on a shelf in the pharmacy. We need to be able to get them into people's bodies as long as they're safe and effective. So, through things like the Global Alliance, the World Alliance, and Project Mercury, there's a lot of work going on all around the globe to make sure that we have the information we need to be able to provide to different payer systems to advocate for coverage. And I see a couple of comments here relating to clinical trials and speeding them up. And I guess I would say that there's also a lot of work happening within the organization to break down some of those barriers. And we know that that's a really big concern. This comment here is treatment and getting treatments to all FSHD patients as quickly as possible. Certainly we share that sense, and I am very lucky that I get to work with, we have one consultant who I've been working most closely with this year, but we really have a strong ecosystem and a lot of champions out there that we've been working with who are taking a look at all of our options and where we can put our resources to try to get to the end goal as quickly as possible.
Can you hear it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is really, really helpful. Thank you all. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And I'm just looking at the clock. I think I have reached my time, Jenny, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. And any additional comments or sort of final notes, I would welcome now. But otherwise, I will hand the meeting back to our fearless leader, Jenny.
I have a question. Sorry. Question from Dana. Earlier, Anna, you put up a template for what we should say to our senators. Is there somewhere else besides the screenshot that we can get that blurb from?
Yeah, Jenny's going to be sending out the slide deck in its entirety after this meeting, so you will have access to it. Yeah, it'll be a copy paste thing.
Yep, I actually just dropped it into the chat. So if you have any issues getting through to that, let me know.
Thank you.
And Darlene, you had your hand up as well?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things that I didn't think of until after you stopped sharing your screen.
Sure.
One is TSA. If something could be done for the Disabilities Act and us going through TSA, I can't raise my hands as many of us can. I have to go through a full frisk every time I go through. And, you know, I feel violated every time, you know, it's not my fault I can't lift my arms. So, yeah. And then the other thing is we're saying treatments. The thing that concerned me is affordable treatments. I know that the FDA, I've got friends that deal with the FDA, and it's very expensive for anybody to get trials through to them, and it's very expensive for them to, you know, I've got a friend who's got a device that works for pain relief, but it's not really a medical device, and he's been years and hundreds of thousands of dollars just trying to get through the FDA. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that there was a question in here about if we had anything that we could update on as far as for treatment and research. We didn't have anything planned to update this evening on that. But if you have any specific questions, you can always reach out to me and I can try to get you to the appropriate person. Okay, any other questions? Okay, awesome.
I had one last question. I had asked earlier, you had talked about the amount of money that we were involved in the CMP program, CMS program. No, that's a different program. CMP.
The PRMRP.
The MRP.
Yeah, it's all acronyms. It's all.
Yeah. So we were accepted into that, which is amazing. And was there an amount given, or
no,
did
it's
they?
not. Yeah, it's not designated funding just for FSHD.
No, I
It's sort of
understand.
a pool that's set aside for a number of different conditions, and now we are among those conditions. So there are only 66 different diseases that qualify for this research funding. So the next step could theoretically be to, the umbrella organization to PRMRP is CDMRP, just to make it extra confusing. So theoretically in the future, we could attempt to almost like upgrade, if you will, to CDMRP funding, which is designated, it would be set aside just for FSHD. That is a lot harder to get. And, you know, I think that we're not in a position this year. It's something that we would want to look at in the future, but it will help us to get into the PRMRP for a few years, more resources. And I did bring this up actually a couple of times, and you know, ALS, for example, is in CDMRP. They get designated funding that's just for ALS research. But when you look
So
at the size,
how do you use that funding? I mean, how does that work?
so academic researchers can apply for it for their projects. So
Okay.
we would go out to, you know, to our CTRN, to our key clinicians, you know, to those types of people who are doing research in our space and say, hey, there's this new pool of funding, you know, do you have projects that are underfunded? Is science being left on the table? Please go apply for this funding. It's available now.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a whole nother process, and then you go back to the fund and say, this is the money we want, and then they have to look at everybody in the, so how long does that take, like forever? To get
It's
that?
actually this particular program has a relatively speedier process because it's smaller, because fewer folks are eligible to apply, so they're not taking everybody, and because it's annual, so they have to, you know, they have to get rid of that money in the fiscal year.
Well, hope, that's great. Good, thank you.
All right.
Oh, Carol just made a comment that that she served as a consumer reviewer for the BCRP and the PRMRP. Oh, Carol. I'm so glad you're here.
Happy to help as possible. I've been a consumer reviewer for the breast cancer research program for probably about 10 years. And then I've also served on the PMRP. So yeah, this is exciting. I missed the first part of the talk. I'm so sorry. But yeah, if there's anything that I can do to help, please reach out to me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Anna, and everyone for your great questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.